My name is Ian and welcome to Planted, my gardening channel. Now for many years I've done videos in my garden, and in my garden I've got a unique collection of, I think, quite special plants, and many of them overwinter in my greenhouse, which is very petite. It's actually tiny, but it's been big enough to get plants through the winter for me here in New England. Now I am delighted to share with you that I've got a bigger greenhouse. It's in a new location. In this video, I'm going to share with you design features, construction techniques, why I built it, why I chose these materials. It's about 10 times bigger than the greenhouse I had before. And I can't wait to share it with you. A big thank you to Jason, who helped me build this structure. And let's get to it. Let's have a quick look at the finished project. I've got a galvanized steel structure. These frames are 4 feet apart, and then fastened to that is a product called Solawrap. I've used it before. It's what my little greenhouse is made of, and this greenhouse is everything I could possibly want it to be. It's actually a lean-to. It's attached to 2 existing exterior walls, and I want to show you how I built it. So this is my location, and it's got some really important inherent features. That overhang means that I can tie the peak of my greenhouse underneath it, and I'll get less chance of any water seeping into my structure. And with the brick and the concrete, they act as a heat sink. They'll take in heat during the day, and they release it at night. So very happy with my site. Now the galvanized steel frame came from a company called CT Greenhouses. There'll be a link in the description. Pleasure working with them, very responsive and very accommodating of my request. Building a lean-to is a little bit different. Most people have a full-size hoop house, but not me. Now, I got all the fixtures and fittings in my kit so that I'm not running around trying to find parts to join my system together. You might think that makes perfect sense. They had everything I needed to build what I wanted to build. Now, one of the engineering challenges that I faced was how to tie in my galvanized steel frame under the eaves of an existing building. And Jason, who helped me build this, stumbled across these brackets. They're available from Granger, and it's just a pivot. It receives the 1.9-inch diameter galvanized tube, and there's a pivot, and then there's a couple of bolts that will screw into the header. Now this is the magic. This is Solawrap, and there's the white extrusion, and then there's the skin that comes in 4 foot, 5 foot, and 6 foot widths. And this is how you assemble it. The white extrusion is fastened to the steel tube, and then the steel tube is fastened to the header. And that articulation that you can see there means that it's an absolute perfect match for whatever angle it is that I want to create. I wanted to make sure that I could get a really nice seal on the top of the header, so I took off part of that face, recessed the extrusion just a little bit, and you see here we get a really nice flush fit. That's how I'm going to build this lean-to. And when you slide in the Solawrap, just like that, you see that at the top it's in line with the wood, and there's a nice face there that I can put a ceiling strip on. I want to make sure that I've got as few air leaks as possible. My first job was to set up the base board, and this is parallel to the longest side of whatever you're building. In my case, because it's a lean-to, I took the longest side of my existing structure, and this is the board. Now these ground posts are 4 feet, and they come with an anvil, and I was surprised. They actually went in quite easily. I thought they might have been a bit more difficult to set. Because there's lots of concrete and bricks, I decided not to put my trusses inside these ground posts, because I couldn't be sure that I would get them exactly at 4 feet spacing. Here we go with a test fit of the first truss. Now you'll see that I've actually got the steel truss attached to the bottom of it. I didn't need that. That could be added later. And what I learned is make sure that you have whatever fittings you need on the bar so that you can attach your truss to it later. And here we have our first test fitting of the first truss going into the header under the eave of the adjacent building. The product that is Solawrap, there'll be a link in the description, it comes in two parts. This is the extrusion, and you can see in the very center there's actually a ridge. There's three walls, one left, one right, and one right in the middle. Makes it very, very tough, very, very durable. And I found having a cut-off saw was by far the best way to get a nice, accurate edge. If you try and cut it by hand, you might find that it's not exactly flush. And I'm very happy that I did this. I bothered to set out some optimum spacings of where I was going to use a self-tapping screw to go through the extrusion into the steel. And I'd also laid out where the hardware I would need for my truss would be. And you don't want to get your hardware trapped between two self-tapping screws and not be able to move it where you need it. So just spend a little bit of time, and you saw me there pre-drilling, and that's absolutely imperative because you can pre-drill right through the center line and it won't crush. You'll be drilling a hole in that internal middle rib, and it helps keep your screws upright rather than being pushed to one side or the other. Having a clamp, these clamps were invaluable. None of this is actually heavy, it's just a little bit awkward. So having a clamp means I could put my extrusion in place and then go off and start drilling my first set of self-tapping screws. In hindsight, I should have bought really good quality self-tapping screws. This is a relatively thick-walled steel structure, and some of the cheap self-tappers just go blunt before they make that hole. So this is just experience. This is what we do, and this is how we learn. I do want to say that if something doesn't fit, don't push it. It means that your measurement is out. And I was able to get within 1/4 of an inch of many of my fittings, and it's something that if you find yourself 3 inches out, don't start chopping and bending. Something's not quite lined up right. And you see me here getting the header end pushed right up into the eave so that I could eventually come down and put it into the upright post. But it kept sliding down, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that means it's too long. But it's not. I just didn't have it set up properly. And eventually we come along, and there it is. It fits into the post beautifully. This is the big wrap of Solawrap. As I said to you before, mine's a 4-foot width, and that's because of the snow load that we get here. If you have minimal snow, you might be able to go for 5 foot or even the 6 foot. But I went for the 4 because we can get some pretty big storms here. Now, you need to make sure that you handle this stuff carefully. There's an upside and a downside, and you just saw me put the cardboard underneath it. You don't want to get this cut or scratched or grazed. It's very tough and very durable. It'll only get damaged if you really do abuse it. But take your time. This is a brand new product, and you want to make sure that it goes onto your structure pristine. So take your time and set it up properly. The best way to handle this stuff is to have a couple of sawhorses or tables, put a pole handle through one end, and then you can pick it up and it will easily unwrap, and you can start to place it onto your structure. This was a very exciting moment, starting to fit the Solawrap. There's many benefits for using Solawrap as a product. I like the fact that if one of these panels were to get ripped or torn, maybe a tree falls on it, I can pull out that single panel and replace it and not have to reskin the rest of my structure. Now, it is a little bit more money, but for me it's worth it because it will last. It's got a warranty of 10 years, and I have no doubt that it will last that long. So, obviously, money is a concern and you want to make sure that you get what you need, this structure inside creates an environment that is so conducive, natural daylight. I find that it's slow to warm up and slow to cool down, which makes it a beautiful working environment. This greenhouse is going to have all sorts of videos shot in it, lots of propagation, lots of planting and plant culture. And this skin will absolutely set it off. Now, let me just make this very clear. You've got to calculate how much you need. When you start cutting it, make sure that you use a straight edge. If you cut on a diagonal, you can very quickly waste many, many feet of your Solawrap. Now here's Jason, who came in on a number of occasions and was an absolute delight to have building this project. We solved many little challenges just by having an extra pair of hands and somebody else to help lift and carry. So thank you, Jason, for all of your effort on this construction. The two buildings, the dark red and the green, are not actually at a 90 degree. They're actually tapered. So we had to put a metal bar on two of our trusses and scribe a line above that green wall area, and then fit another bar on it, and then fit a wooden header, so it's not 90 degrees. Now this is important. You see here we're sliding on the extrusion. Try and keep it straight. If you get a bit of a curve, it's very easy for it to start to get caught and not flow easily. Put a clamp on that, hold it in place, and then here we are sliding on another piece of extrusion, and we'll be adding another clamp. Very straightforward. Don't over tighten the self-tapping screws. You'll hear the sound will change when it's just about to bite. Our kit comes with some bracing, which for freestanding units is very, very important. But because ours is already tied to two walls, this is just another layer of added security that our structure is going to stay put and not twist and flex. And I like the security that brings me. When you start to connect your structure together, be very careful. If something is caught, then don't push it, don't force it. I like to cut those straight 90-degree corners or the angles with my chop saw, and this is the reason why. I want to get a nice tight joint, and putting a clamp on there will ensure that happens. What I should have done was actually have had a 10-foot piece come around the curve, and I would have had no join on the curve. I've had the joins further in the structure. Now I had to come up with a way to attach my trusses and also the purlins. The trusses go from across ways and purlins go lengthways. Now I've got 4 trusses to assemble, so I set these 4 brackets 48 inches on center and then hung it up approximately level where I want it. And that meant that I could then attach my truss structure to my rail, knowing that they were at the correct distance apart. You see here that my header is just a little bit high. So I can level all of those as one because they're all attached. It made it very, very easy. I would encourage you to get your rails up first with all the hardware attached in the right places, and then build your truss structure all together, rather than doing it as you go one at a time, because no matter how you build them, they won't be level, they won't be exactly where you want them. So I was able, in an afternoon, it was only maybe 2 or 3 hours, I came in and built the 4 trusses that we've got here, and I was trying to be very meticulous, and I was astounded how at first it wouldn't fit, and then you would loosen something, and then go back to it, and it could then seat properly. So don't twist stuff, don't force it, just tap, adjust, measure again. Suddenly it will all come together and line up beautifully, and you're not putting in any inherent forces or adding any twist. That's very important. So get the job set up right, and it'll tighten up nicely. I did the 2 outer trusses first, then set up a line, and that meant that I could get them to just fit together beautifully. Now, working on the termination of the other end, we scribed the line, added the header board, and then with some Tapcon screws we were able to get that in exactly the right plane. You have to take measurements off the frame and scribe them onto the wall, and then you'll have your header in just the right place. This turned out really good. I knew it was going to be difficult, or at least tricky, but I'm very, very happy with the outcome. Here you see the frame. There's a curve started on one beam, there's a curve started on the upright, and then the rest of the curve is in this little piece that's being fitted now. And of course that'll get trimmed down and attached. Now the purlins run the length. It's the same bracket that I used to tie the trusses to the header on the other wall. Very easy, very simple, easy to get at, and it worked out just great. And here's our structure. We've got it tied into 2 sides of the building. We've got 5 trusses installed, and now we're going to start tightening down the Solawrap. And this is, I think, one of the main benefits of Solawrap. There's many benefits, but this really does help. The extrusion is screwed to your steel frame, and the Solawrap slides inside that extrusion. Now this little assembly here, it's just putting even tension across the whole of the bottom edge that's been cut. And just by standing on this, you can tighten that up. And when you tighten it up, the whole thing gains in strength. Make sure that you are diligent and that you add bolts and fittings to wherever you need them. It's easy to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and then move on to 5 and 6 and skip 4, or I'll come back and do it. Here you see me adding some bolts. This is the lower board attached to the ground posts. And as if on cue, we got a rainfall, and it's just working beautifully. Once you've done the side of the roof, you're going to have to turn your attention to the ends. Now, on a typical construction, you might have one of these buildings could be 100 feet long or more. And mine is very, very petite in the grand scheme of things. But you're going to have to pay attention to how you're going to terminate the end wall. Now, some people use perspex because you can cut that to the curve. Some will use sheet plastic. I actually carefully measured, and I wanted to use Solawrap for this step as well. You have to make sure that you get a nice tight seal, and I was able to pass my Solawrap underneath the extrusion and then refasten the extrusion. And I'm pleased. It takes a bit of time, but it was worth doing. And I cannot stress this enough. Any opportunity you've got to fasten your greenhouse into concrete, you should do it. Because there will be forces coming at very different angles, even though this is a lean-to. And here we are drilling in concrete and adding some Tapcon screws. This is the header going up, which will be the door frame. I wanted a 6-foot wide door with an 8.5 feet high space, and this will be separated into 2 doors. Now, I measured the amount of Solawrap I needed, and then I measured it again, and then I measured it again, and I checked myself 4 or 5 times, and I ended up with about 1.5 feet left over. I was very fortunate. So do pay attention and make sure that you're accurate with your measurements. You don't want to have a job come up and find that you can't finish because you're missing 20 feet. So be careful and make sure that you cut nice, straight, 90-degree cuts and not the taper. I mentioned that earlier. If you've got a bigger structure and you're losing a foot or so on every cut that you make, that will soon mount up. So let's take a closer look now that we are finished with the process of building my lean-to greenhouse. The Galvanized steel tubes are 1.9 inches in diameter. It's near enough 2 inches. And then there's a narrower size for the trusses that you see here. Having now built it and spent many hours building it, I am absolutely delighted with the result. With it being a lean-to, I've got lots of height, but I don't have a huge footprint taking up lots of space. So I've got the benefits of both. The 8.5 foot height gives me lots of above head space, and I'll even do some storage on those trusses that you see up there. This is wooden rail, goes all the way along. I chose pressure treated. I intend for it to be up there for many, many, many years. And it's become such a beautiful space in which to work. So I've been lucky enough to have had this greenhouse built, and then I was able to build the doors using the greenhouse as a workshop. It worked great. Oh, that reminds me, this brick wall is going to absorb heat. Old-fashioned, very, very important, as is the concrete. So my insulated greenhouse is going to have this as a heat source, and it's free. I'm capitalizing on solar energy. Now I do want to point out that the modular system of Solawrap has got an insulative value, which is why it's slow to heat up and slow to cool down. It's much more stable for plant growth. Plants like nice stable conditions. And here are the two doors. Look at that. Now the door on the right is that width because it's a full 4-foot panel that I was able to use there. Obviously no point cutting it down. And with the two different sizes, I can keep the 4-foot door closed and then come in and out of the 2.5-foot door or 2-foot door. And I've got a nice sealed lip around all of that. And I'm even going to put in some draft excluder to further keep out the bad cold weather. You can see here that my above ground frames are fastened to my wooden rail. And then my wooden rail is fastened to the ground posts that go in the ground. Typically they would line up, but I felt that because there was so much brick and concrete that I wouldn't be able to get those posts, those ground posts, in exactly the right spot. This method means that I've got nice 48 inches exactly. So something to share with you. Now, coming to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to do some videos on potting up some plants soon, but I guess you could call this part one. Part two, I'm going to talk about ventilation, getting in fresh air, which is very important into a greenhouse, and also expelling hot air. So look out for the next video where I'll be fitting an automatic vent that goes up in the eave of the greenhouse. And I'll also be fitting an automatic vent that opens up and lets cold air in. So I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you so much for watching. This probably is my longest video to date. Bye for now.